Hi there, it's your Buckeye brother Doug, and this is the Brother Buckeye broadcast. How you been? Glad to be back. Today we're going to talk about pods. So really, this is a podcast. The new Big Ten, how are they going to do that? You know, I sort of like the idea of an East-West, but the problem is you limit the possibilities. If you have Ohio State having to play the other 8 teams in the East, then it doesn't leave a lot of, then you've only got 1 or 2 possibilities in the West. And I don't think we want to do it that way. I think it's okay to have an East-West, but the 9 teams have to be in pods. And this is what I mean. Let me minimize that. So this is what I've come up with. So your East pods, Pod 1, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State. Pod 2, Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers. Pod 3, Purdue, Indiana, Northwestern. In the West, Pod 4, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa. Pod 5 is Oregon, Washington, Minnesota. Pod 6 is USC, UCLA, Nebraska. So each team in these pods play each other every year, protecting the regional rivalries such as Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Indiana, Purdue, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, and the trio of Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin. Also, by combining Rutgers, Maryland, and Penn State, you continue to try to build those future rivalries in the East. Nebraska needs to recruit California like it did in their glory days, so by placing them in the USC, UCLA pod, it helps them. They really need to do that because they're not pulling players from the East. They're not pulling players from the Midwest like Michigan and Ohio or even Illinois. And they're not really pulling a lot of players out of the Southeast, California or Texas. And California was their fertile ground, California and Texas. This gives them a chance to kind of rebuild those California ties. All right. So where was I? So Minnesota, because it's the northernmost Big Ten team, makes the most sense to have it in the Washington-Oregon pod. They've got to go somewhere. I'd like to have Illinois Northwestern in the same pod, but it actually helps the trio of Purdue and Indiana Northwestern to play a round robin so they can create some wins there and not always be banging their heads against the big boys. And you can always have that one crossover exception with Northwestern and Illinois. So that wouldn't be hard to do. So each pod in the East and West play within their pod. Again, that's Ohio State, Michigan. Then play 2 of the teams in the other 2 pods in their division. That means Ohio State would be playing 2 of Penn State, Rutgers, and Maryland, and 2 of Indiana, Purdue, and Northwestern. Then they would be playing, if it's a 9-game schedule, 1 of the Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin pod, 1 of the Washington, Illinois, Oregon pod, and 1 of the USC, UCLA, Nebraska pod. If there is a 10th Big Ten game, that's where you would grab a second team from one of these other pods, such as, depending on the year and depending on the scheduling, maybe you grab 2 of Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, or 2 of Oregon, Washington, Minnesota, or 2 of USC, UCLA, Nebraska. But what you would not do is play more than 2 of the Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA traditional Pac-12 teams. Because what we're trying to do here is create a championship game, the Big Ten championship game, which most likely will feature Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, possibly Michigan State, against one of Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA, maybe Nebraska, or Wisconsin. I mean, yeah, some years you're going to have a traditional Big Ten championship game with an Ohio State, Wisconsin. But I really think Oregon, USC are really going to benefit from this. And that way you can have a Big Ten championship game that brings back the Rose Bowl, because that's going away. the Pac 8, 10, 12 Big Ten Rose Bowl game is no more, because the Rose Bowl now is officially a part of the future of the, where they're putting in playoff teams, quarterfinals, semifinals, championship games. But you could still have that theoretically, and even in the Rose Bowl itself, by doing it this way. A lot of versatility, a lot more great games, but you're not hand-tied by the Buckeyes having to play 8 other Eastern teams, or USC playing 8 other Western teams and only playing a couple of crossovers. That's what they've got going on in the SEC, and you've got all these great teams in the SEC, but because they only play 8 games, there's only 2 crossovers. And some of those crossovers are permanent crossovers. So you may go 3, 4, 5 years without some of these SEC teams ever playing each other, which is no good. That's not what it's supposed to be. So here's a schedule, a sample schedule of what this would look like. Now, I believe Ohio State should schedule an opener that is either a group of 5 or a Power 5 okay team, like a Pitt or a West Virginia, maybe an SMU, Boston College, a Louisville, maybe even a Kentucky. But no more Alabamas, Georgias, Texas, Oklahomas as opening games. Or unless it's Notre Dame, I don't think Ohio State should do that if the Big Ten goes to a 10-game schedule. So, for example, Pitt, home opener. Miami of Ohio, a MAC, Ohio-based team, the second team. Then you get into 10 Big Ten teams in a row. Michigan State's the third game of the season away. Purdue at home, Maryland away, Oregon at home, Iowa away, Penn State at home, Northwestern away, UCLA at home, Illinois away, and Michigan at home. Now, whether the Big Ten would allow Ohio State to play Michigan, UCLA, Penn State, Oregon, all at home, probably wouldn't go that way. But in a year where Michigan is the home game, I could see a couple of those, maybe an Oregon and a Penn State at home, for example, and maybe we travel to the Southern California. So that kind of leans a little bit, as a homer, you wouldn't normally see it look that good, but that's the general idea. 5 home Big Ten games, 5 away, 2 out-of-conference home games. Ohio State always has the 7 home games. That, to me, would be a winning thing. Now, has anyone ever done pods before? They haven't. It looks a little bit like the NFL, but with fewer teams per, micro division. Usually you have 4, but with 18 teams, it just doesn't work. Because if you went with 4, 4, 4, and 4, that's 16. You'd have 2, in need of 2 more teams. Now, if they go to 20 and add Stanford and Cal, or add Stanford and Notre Dame, then it just becomes really, really interesting. But as of the recording of this on the 10th of August, we don't have that. So if you're going to do pods, it has to be 3 teams. And winning your pod has nothing to do with winning the Big Ten championship. Literally, Michigan State could lose to both Michigan and Ohio State, but run the table on all of their other games, finish 10-2, and represent the East in the Big Ten championship game. So it's not like the NFL where the winner of their 4-game pods automatically make the playoffs. That isn't the way it's going to work, in my idea. What are your ideas? Put your comment below. Like, subscribe, do the notification bell. This is a fan talking about the Buckeyes, a fan talking about college football. I do not have inside knowledge, but I'm a junkie for this stuff. I mean, I used to email back and forth with Coach Tressel for years, almost the entire 10 years he was the coach of Ohio State. He and I went back and forth with emails. And by the way, it wasn't a big surprise to me about what happened in 2010. It was clear to me via the emails that something was up. And there was. So, yeah. And I'm on the boards 247. Ohio State. Sometimes I'm on 11 Warriors. Those are the two places I go, but mostly it's the rival site, 247 Ohio State, a.k.a. Bucknuts, because I am. So are you if you're watching this. So we'll see you soon, probably again tomorrow, and we'll go over some of the things that the assistant coaches have been saying, what Ryan Day said at his recent press conference. And there haven't been a lot of injuries. Amari Arbor, he is hurt and probably will not play until mid-season. Everybody else is healthy and ready to go. And you're excited. I'm excited. Let's meet here again, right here. It is the Brother Buckeye broadcast. I'm Doug Daniels. And make it a fantastic evening and a fantastic week. Go Bucks.